Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show. Today, bringing you another really awesome guest involved in creating a better tomorrow for all of us. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Pete O'Hearn, who is the Chief Executive Officer of FibroBiologics, which is a biopharmaceutical company that's focused on developing and commercializing Fibroblast cell-based therapies for patients suffering from a variety of chronic degenerative diseases. Mr. O'Hearn has over 25 years experience in both med tech and biotech development, brings together a wide range of resources to commercialize unique technologies, has experience from everything from business startups to focus on biologics to medical devices, patient-centered healthcare delivery. Prior to founding FibroBiologics, he founded an operational investment group known as Advanced Medical Technologies that identifies various early-stage opportunities in the medical field that have strong IP. He was also involved in founding NeoSurg Technologies. They are developing their T2000 minimally invasive access system, also involved in the sale of that company to Cooper Surgical. And he brings really decades of executive level experience from his time at Christus Health Care Corporation, involved in everything from biologics, surgical instrumentation, telemedicine. He got his bachelor's degree in healthcare admin from Texas State University, his master's in healthcare administration from University of Houston, Clear Lake, and executive management certification, mergers and acquisitions, University of Chicago. A lot of interesting themes to go into today. We're honored to have him. Pete O'Hearn, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Thanks for having me, Ira. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. I would just, love to start off before we get into all these interesting topics surrounding Fibroblasts, just to give you the mic for a few minutes to talk a little bit more about you, because you've had a really interesting run, healthcare admin into sort of the venture capital world, M&A, and now running this really interesting shop. Talk a little bit about yourself for a couple minutes, if you would, and how sort of your journey got started on all this.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I started in hospital administration, where my undergraduate and graduate degrees were, and I come from a medical background. My grandfather was the first urologist in Houston, Texas, so he brought kidney dialysis from Dallas in the early 50s to save his partner's life, and the headlines of the paper said that Dr. O'Hearn brings the human washing machine to Houston. So I've just been around it my whole life. It's all I ever wanted to be involved in was medicine. Ironically, I have 3 children, and all they wanted was computers. As much as my wife, who's a nurse, and I tried to talk them into going into the medical field, they all wanted computers. So it's all I was ever interested in. And while I was at the hospital, as administrator of hospital, all the surgeons you work with are natural inventors. I mean, they all have an idea on how to do something better. They have the resources to prototype it, invent it, patent it. And then that's kind of where they stop. And so I was approached by a group in the late 90s who said, hey, listen, would you help us with this set of surgical instruments? And I said, man, I had known nothing about product development outside of the service product development when I started the first sports medicine program, different varieties of those types of programs. But in terms of like creating a physical product and putting it out in the market, I hadn't done that before. So I told them I would take 6 months away from my position, and if it didn't work, I would go back into hospital administration, and I never went back. we developed what I thought was the best instrument system in the world. And Cooper Surgical agreed with me, and they purchased that. And so we've been in biologics since that time. That was 2006, I guess. So we've been in the biologic space since that time. So still work a lot. I mean, our shareholder base is over 100 surgeons, probably 60 or 70 neurosurgeons, and another 20 or 30 general surgeons, and then orthopedic surgeons, and you name it. So I like the surgeons are just natural inventors, and they're all constantly thinking of ways to do things better, more efficient, quicker, better quality outcomes, and those are the kind of people that I like to be around.
Excellent. And let's, before we get into the company, let's talk a little bit about Fibroblast here, because this is it's a term that the audience is somewhat familiar with, in the sense that, we've done shows that have focused on, hey, here are these cells that they make up a decent part of us. I think I read somewhere about 6 or 7% of the trillions of cells that make up all our bodies are fibroblast. They're pretty good at holding things together and laying down extracellular matrix and wound healing. They're also good for playing around in a petri dish and doing all sorts of fun things with that. But this whole area that you're getting involved in is kind of unique, in the sense that, and you point this out on your website, that while we normally think about tissue repair and fibrosis, we don't usually associate things like complex regeneration and other complex reparative processes with fibroblast. Yet, and again, we'll be putting the link to FibroBiologics site in the show notes. A lot of papers out there starting to come out that, hey, these fibroblasts deserve a second look, because they may be doing a lot more than we thought they did. Talk a little bit about the history here. Why have we sort of overlooked this other potential of this sort of workhorse cell of the industry?
Yeah, it's interesting. Fibroblasts actually began the stem cell revolution. There's a reason why we evolved with fibroblasts as the most common cell in the human body, and it's because they're involved in every biologic process. So we like to say the entire stem cell revolution began with the fibroblast. Dr. Yamanaka in 2012 won the Nobel Prize in Japan, and you were off to the races. But guess what he used to create that stem cell? He used a fibroblast. And you would think that naturally they would look back and go, well, wait a minute, what's going on with that source cell, as opposed to the iPSCs that they were working with at that time, induced pluripotent stem cells. It's what he won the Nobel Prize for. Mm-hmm. But there was talk that they kind of viewed fibroblasts at that time as relegated to the evolutionary scrap heap of connective tissue, as you had mentioned before. They just thought it was connective tissue. And I think it's one of those things where they just didn't realize the therapeutic value. And really not other people didn't either, because when we started this company, there were 1 or 2 papers a year written about fibroblasts. There are 1 or 2 a day now. Yeah. So I think that everybody's starting to, we like to say it's the B-side to the single. Occasionally a record label would send out a single and the B-side would become the hit. And that's where fibroblasts and stem cells are the A side, but the real hit is you flip it over and there's fibroblasts. They're more potent than stem cells, easier to harvest with stem cells, easier to grow than stem cells, easier to ship. They have a higher immune modulation capabilities than stem cells. They're just a better all-around cell than stem cells. And, when you look at evolution, you say, well, why do we have the things? When we found out, when I grew up in a generation where if you had 2 sore throats, your tonsils were removed because we thought it was an insignificant organ. Well, we found that was completely wrong. That has a large role to play in the immune system, right? So I think that all along we've kind of ignored areas of the body, but we are a very elegant invention, the human body, and everything is there for a reason. And so we like to say that fibroblasts evolved as the most common cell because they're involved in every single biologic process, more than stem cells. And they interact with other cells. For instance, the mood that you're in today is driven by your hormones. Well, we have intellectual property filed where fibroblasts are communicating with hormones. What an amazing thing that could end up being if your fibroblast could control your mood or depression or eating disorders. And I think that's where we're heading with fibroblasts.
Yeah, I enjoyed reading through some of those papers, and you talk about them coming out every couple of days now. I saw interesting stuff in there on heart disease, which we normally think, all right, fibroblast, scar tissue, but really interesting effects there alone on how, there may be plasticity there that we haven't even, looked at on how, and again, this is, a focus. We'll get into this in a little bit about, from the transdifferentiation folks looking on how to turn those fibroblasts into something else and so forth. Pete, as I mentioned in your bio, with your venture capitalist hat on, obviously, you've been looking at investments over the years, and having strong intellectual property has always been an important part of that for you. And clearly, with this company, FibroBiologics, and again, I refer everybody to your website, you've really you've put together quite a portfolio here of everything that has to, there are patents here, everything from the use of fibroblast to treat disease, to the techniques to expand fibroblast, to the sort of the secreted moieties, the exosomes, the peptides that may be doing something, and the interesting cocktails that you can, once again, sort of Yamanaka style, start asking a fibroblast to do other things. Talk about how you put this portfolio together, because it looks like, you basically sealed it all up, which is a great thing for the company. But talk a little bit about that.
That's great prep work for this, because we're really proud of the IP that we've built. And you can imagine telling a group of shareholders that want you to move to commercialization that you're exploring the science. So we haven't taken any venture capital in our company. We've done it all through angels. Had we taken venture capitalists, we probably would have ended up with 25 patents and 2 disease paths, and we would have had to stop. Yeah. But our angels allowed us to explore the science. And while we started in the spine, I was challenging our scientists to look beyond that and say, well, what other therapeutic areas? And we just had an explosion of discovery in the lab. At one point, we were filing 5 patents a week. So not only were we filing for the therapeutic use in certain disease paths, but how do we harvest them? How do we grow them? How do we efficiently ramp up the number of fibroblasts that we're growing in the lab? How do all of those things tie in? And there's intellectual property in that along the way. So, as we did that, we built our portfolio, and we clearly we have more intellectual property related to fibroblasts than all other companies in the world combined. And we continue to advance that. We filed 2 new patents last week. We filed new program areas in wound care and psoriasis and extension of life, which is a really exciting program we have. So I think that where you think, wow, we've been patenting for a number of years, maybe there's a saturation point. There's not, because there's new hills to climb for us, and we are constantly looking at new discoveries. So it's a really exciting time for fibroblasts. We're now seeing some of the academicians doing studies who have no connection to us, no introduction to us. We have no idea who they are. They're doing studies which we own the IP for. That's actually providing additional validation for our IP. So that's exciting.
And again, when you go look at sort of, and you mentioned some of this earlier, and sort of the therapeutic areas you're involved in, there's everything sort of in your sort of clinical stage portfolio, from degenerative disc disease, MS. You got some diabetic wound care stuff here going on here. Can you just explain a little, because I know there's different, there's something called Cybracell, and then there's the CYMS101, CYW628. Talk a little bit about what these are. I know, again, some may be cell products, some may be secreted stuff. Walk us through a little bit here of the clinical portfolio that you got going on.
Sure. I'd be happy to. I want to retouch on one of the comment that you'd made earlier, that we're using lysates and exosomes and all that. We are. Fibroblasts are great. Are there fragments of fibroblasts that are equally great? And so I think that's an area where we're exploring a lot of our patents over the last few years now include not just fibroblasts, but fragments of fibroblasts.
Excellent.
So our CyberCell is really kind of our first product. That was to be used to inject into the disc and the spine to regrow the nucleus of the disc. But really, that's kind of the core product, and off of that, you're going to see different uses of that. So the way we treat multiple sclerosis will be an IV injection. So I think you'll see direct injection, you'll see IV injection, you'll see IM, intramuscular, you'll see intrathecal, you'll see all of that. I would not even put it past an oral administration of fibroblasts at some point. We're not saying no to anything. So I think that's those areas that we're working in all have their own little recipe for how those fibroblasts are going to target those therapeutic areas. But I think sometimes when cells get in the body, including stem cells, we're not really sure what happens. How do those stem cells know to home to the disease? How do they know what do they see on the way to the disease? How long do they last in the bloodstream? Do they clear out? Do you have 70% attrition on the first pass? I mean, what happens when it's in the body? That part we still don't know, and I don't know that anybody does.
Keeping that, I mean, thinking about that for a moment, because I know if we sort of look at the history of the stem cell space, the last couple of decades, let's say, the amazing sort of uptake in or growth of immuno-oncology compared to sort of the regenerative side of things is pretty fascinating. But what I thought was equally fascinating here, and now we have to hop to sort of the early phase of things, is that what you're doing and some of the concepts in terms of, you mentioned before, how these fibroblasts not just do the therapeutic stuff that affect things around them. You're working in cancer immunotherapy as well, which I thought that's a really cool bridge between regeneration and sort of immuno-oncology. Can you say just a couple of words about whatever's happening? I mean, I'm sitting here in Philly, and we got some CAR T, obviously, innovation happening down the road here at Penn. Interesting things related to fibroblast and immuno-oncology.
We're just getting started in our cancer program, and it would almost be premature for me to go into any details because we're not sure what's going to lead us with fibroblasts. We know that there are cancer-associated fibroblasts. Everybody's heard of those. Yep. That's where the cancer uses the fibroblast to cloak itself to, if it wants to metastasize to another area of the body. So that would seem strange, right? We're using fibroblasts when there's cancer-associated fibroblasts, which seem to protect the tumor.
Yeah.
There are two different types of fibroblasts. There are good fibroblasts. There are bad fibroblasts. And it is the on-off switches that are important to us. How do we get the good fibroblasts to flip the off switch on the bad fibroblasts without becoming a bad fibroblast themselves?
Right.
That's the challenge. And I think that's where you'll see a lot of our work in the cancer area. In the immune system, our extension of life program is truly the only one in the world like it. Right. It is exotic, and I like to say if you look at read 1,000 emails or see 1,000 company presentations the next month, you won't hear one of them use the term thymic involution.
Yeah.
And that's because that thymus gland, is it's an important teaching center for the immune system.
Yep.
But when you get into your 50s and 60s and 70s, that the gland, it starts to slow down, shut down, die, if you will. And so, you don't have more cancer in your 70s than you have in your 40s. You just have a more active thymus gland, which teaches the body to kill the cancer or the malignancy. And so when you get in your 70s, it has stopped functioning. Well, there's a lot of fibroblasts in that thymus. So we're going to use fibroblasts to regenerate that thymic function. If you can regenerate that thymic function, you can extend human life 15 years. And nobody is chasing that. And it's an exotic area, but we're really excited about what fibroblasts can do to regenerate the capacity of the dying thymus.
Yeah. It's interesting because that was just one of the open agency announcements of ARPA-H in terms of thymus rejuvenation out of the White House a couple of weeks ago. So I think you're definitely in the sweet spot in the sense, not just that you've been looking at it, but developing the IP.
And it's great. People, when we brought it up almost 3 years ago, it just went over everyone's head. They were, but I think I read some company looks like they may be looking in that area as well, maybe with stem cells. So I don't know if they heard about what we were doing and came up with that, or they did it independently of us. There's a lot of people working on a lot of different sciences out there, but if you use stem cells to do it, I'll bet you we're going to have a better result with fibroblasts. But even, I like to say, people ask me, well, which is going to win, stem cells or fibroblasts? And I used to say, well, there's Coke and Pepsi, and they're both doing really well. So as far as we're concerned, there's room for both.
As you're speaking of exotic stuff, I just have to ask, and obviously if there's confidential, don't say anything. But again, thinking about Dr. Yamanaka, with his Nobel Prize, and then the more recent stuff with sort of transdifferentiation work. Obviously, these technologies, in terms of in vivo application, where you're just zapping someone's existing fibroblast, is still a bit out there. But any interesting stuff sort of in your strategy meetings on chemicals or proteins or cocktails of such to, do some in vivo reprogramming of fibroblasts? Maybe not today, but 10 years, 5 years from now.
I think you may see that. What we like to say with chemicals is, we've done the research and we can't find any examples of big pharma curing anything ever. And I used their products this morning. I'm going to use them again tomorrow morning. But you think about it, it's almost the height of human arrogance to think that an externally man-made chemical compound is going to be able to be introduced into the body to cure a chronic disease.
Right.
You're taking a man-made chemical compound and you're asking it to cure a biologic defect. It's never going to happen. In fact, we've had a 60-year run and we haven't cured anything. So I think that the defect in the biologic process can only be cured by another biologic process. That's going to come through cell therapy, gene therapy, or immunotherapy. It's not going to come from another man-made chemical compound. Now, having said that, some of those chemical compounds may provide an altering state to a fibroblast or to a stem cell that may provide enhanced therapeutic capabilities. That could happen. But in terms of just giving someone another chemical compound, we will continue to do it. Sometimes it can forestall it, but it will never cure it. And the fact that we've said that now at a couple of conferences, and we have not been disputed by one of our major pharma brethren at these conferences might tell you that that's also a discussion with them. It's interesting, when we were working on our spine product, we went to all the major spine companies, and of course they'd never heard of Fibroblasts, and all their chief scientific officers were in the room. And when we circled back about 4 years later to do an update tour with them, all those chief scientific officers had left and they went to work for cell therapy companies. So I think that was very telling.
Excellent.
Hardware, putting more, as our spine surgeons would tell you, putting more hardware in patients is not the future. It can't be.
Yeah, absolutely. What's coming up for the rest of 2023 as we get into 2024 with the company? Because clearly, you've put together an amazing IP portfolio. You got a great scientific advisory board of directors here. Seems like you're doing some collaborations on the skincare front. You have a new lab you just opened a few weeks ago, actually. What else is happening? Things that we should know about as we continue to keep an eye on you and the company in the coming months.
Well, we're going to continue to expand our scientific team. I mean, I think that's where all the invention and validation is coming from. And when you're developing something new like we are, the integrity of your science is everything to us. I mean, people will walk in a room and they'll doubt we have, so we have that science has to lead the way. And so you'll see us hiring additional scientists to make sure that you know we've internally made it a very difficult hill to climb, so that when we show that externally, we have all the credibility that we need on our science. So you'll see an expansion there. You'll see an expansion of our lab areas. You'll see us out at more conferences, kind of telling our story. We're excited about that. You'll see. I would not be surprised one bit if we filed another 20 to 30 patents next year on the manufacturing process. I think all that's coming. So just where we are now, it continues to grow and expand.
And I just got to ask, because I've done a couple episodes recently with folks playing around in the space station, but I noticed, one of your scientific advisory boards is an astronaut. Any Fibroblast and space work that we should know about? Any cool things that
you know what? I haven't
to...
even asked. That's a great question. She was actually Kate Rubin. She was the first astronaut to sequence DNA in space. So she is, and I would encourage anyone that listens to this podcast to go look up her bio.
Yeah, she's cool.
You can't even imagine what she has accomplished in her career. It is amazing. She's worked at Salk Institute, Rod. She's been at every one of the major institutes, and she's a PhD microbiologist, and she's an astronaut, and she's brilliant. So, we're just thrilled that she is interested enough in Fibroblasts to serve on our scientific advisory board, and she's very active, and we wish her well, and we wish her luck that she gets chosen on one of the next missions, because we'd love to see what she does in space.
Yeah. And nice to bring this FibroBiologics products up to space too. That would be, and then a whole other set of IP there for you. But that's kind of pretty cool.
That's right. That's right.
That's right. One last, while we have you, Pete, just what you mentioned, some conferences. Anything that we should know about coming up in terms of places you're going to be, in terms of talks, conferences, places we can run into you as we get near the end of the year. Anything else that I missed, please?
Sure, we'll be announcing those, but I do know that we have a couple of presentations coming up during JP Morgan week in
Excellent.
San Francisco. We're not presenting on behalf of JP Morgan, but we're presenting in the conference at other facilities there during JP Morgan. So look on our website when these come up. We'll make the announcement, and people will be able to see exactly where we're presenting. So you'll see more of that, more podcasts, more exposure.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad we had an opportunity to do things here, as you're really at a very interesting inflection point, and going to continue to follow you and the company, and it's going to be an exciting couple of years coming up. I know, no doubt. Again, for everybody that's going to be listening to this episode of our show across the various podcast networks, or watching on the YouTube channel, again, you've been listening to Pete O'Hearn, Chief Executive Officer of FibroBiologics, doing really amazing things to develop, commercialize these innovative fibroblast cell-based therapies and biologics for a range of patients suffering chronic degenerative disease. Pete, I want to again thank you for taking the time to come on the show and talk for a little while about what you're up to. Thanks for what you do. And as we like to say on our show here, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow for lots of patients out there via what you're working on. Really great story.
Thank you, I really appreciate it.